When the stakes are, well, literally the future of civilization, what enables a single person to step forward, to make those fateful world-changing decisions? And maybe more importantly, if those principles worked in, the darkest hour of human history, how powerful could they be for the challenges we face, the financial strategic stuff in our professional lives today?
That really is the core puzzle we're looking at. Yeah. Today's deep dive focuses on maybe the ultimate example of that kind of crisis leadership. Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister during World War II.
Right. And our main source here is an analysis of his philosophy, centered around the book The Man Who Thought. And this isn't just a history book, it's more an exploration of his strategic foresight, his philosophical writings.
Exactly. It gets into how he navigated Britain through its absolute moment of maximum peril. So our mission today is really to strip away some of that historical context and uncover the mechanisms, the core principles of his strategic thinking, what allowed Britain to survive and ultimately lead the Allied victory.
And then the crucial part.
And then translate those extreme lessons into advice you can actually use right now in your own leadership challenges, whether that's managing a global team or just navigating a major personal decision point.
It's such an incredible study because initially, anyway, it wasn't about sheer military might, was it?
Not at all.
It highlights how Churchill, really through sheer will and incredibly crafted communication, convinced a nation that was, frankly, on the brink of collapse to choose resistance, not surrender.
It's a powerful argument, really, that a single mind, armed with the right strategy, the right resolve, can genuinely alter the path of history.
So where do we start? What are the key takeaways from the source material?
Okay, let's look at the core strategic nuggets. The book kind of organizes Churchill's response to that extreme pressure into 4 distinct principles. We can call them the pillars of crisis leadership.
Pillars. Okay. Let's start with the foundation then. When everyone else was folding under pressure, what was his non-negotiable, his starting point?
Right. So the first pillar is what we could call leadership in crisis, the unyielding spirit. You have to remember, Churchill took the helm just as France had fallen. Britain was completely alone, isolated.
Terrifying prospect.
Absolutely. And his core strategic mandate was incredibly simple, but also almost impossible sounding. Absolute non-surrender. He really hammered home to the British people that compromise meant death, that only this unwavering resolve could keep hope alive and allow Britain to even continue the fight.
And that resolve, it wasn't just physical grit, was it? It was psychological, fought with words.
Exactly. Which brings us straight to the second pillar, the power of speech and rhetoric.
Oh, the famous speeches.
Yes, but more than just famous, Churchill was a wartime wordsmith. He knew Britain's military resources were dangerously low, so its morale needed to be, limitless. And he didn't use language to, sugarcoat the danger. Not at all.
No, he acknowledged it.
He acknowledged it fully. He used it to define the mission, to unify a really diverse population behind this one single stark choice.
He basically transformed passive fear into active unified resistance. And the most famous symbol of this, the source points to his "We shall never surrender" declaration. That wasn't just boosting morale, was it? It was an active strategic tool.
Absolutely. It was signaling to the world, and maybe just as importantly, signaling directly to Hitler himself, that negotiation, permanently off the table.
Wow. Okay, so that's spirit in words. What's next?
Then we move to the mechanism that often separates good leaders from truly strategic visionaries. Pillar 3, strategic foresight or the future view. Churchill wasn't just reacting to what the Nazis were doing day to day.
He was looking ahead.
Way ahead. A key trait highlighted is his ability to assess the whole global geopolitical situation. But with an eye 5, 10, even 20 years down the line, he was anticipating future conflicts before the current one was even fully underway.
And the prime example of that foresight, a decision made when Britain was fighting just to stay alive.
Yes. His early and absolutely unwavering realization that countering the Nazis required an immediate, enduring strategic alliance with the United States.
Even when others maybe didn't see it or didn't want to see it.
Exactly. He knew, despite a lot of internal resistance, that only American industrial power could guarantee eventual victory. He saw the long game.
It's incredible, planning for the post-war win while still fighting the desperate early battles.
It showed he grasped the bigger picture, the necessary resources required long before others were ready to admit it.
Okay, and the fourth pillar. This one sounds maybe the hardest to apply personally.
It can be. Pillar 4 is steadfastness and resistance to pressure. And this goes beyond just simple bravery. It emphasizes standing firm. Firm against external challenges, yes, but also against internal peer pressure, avoiding the fear of hardship or even political isolation.
Standing alone if necessary.
That's often what it took. This is where you see the absolute strategic utility of stubbornness, perhaps. The defining moment here, the book argues, was his refusal to even consider negotiating peace with the Nazis right after France fell.
When many others wanted to.
Oh, yes. Many powerful political and military figures were pushing for peace talks, to try and save the British Empire from what looked like certain destruction. But Churchill chose uncompromising resistance. He fundamentally believed that true victory, lasting victory, could only be achieved by refusing to yield on that core mission.
It's kind of terrifying to imagine standing against almost everyone in that moment. It really speaks volumes about conviction.
It truly does, an incredible amount.
Okay, so those are the pillars derived from the source, the man who thought. Let's unpack the source itself a little. We're relying on this material, but we need that balanced perspective. How valuable is it really? And, does it have any blind spots?
Well, on the one hand, it's undeniably inspiring. It does a great job linking that philosophical resolve Churchill had with actual political action. It shows leadership demands that audacity, to make those incredibly difficult decisions and to use crises as leverage rather than just shrinking away.
Okay, but let's get into the critique. You mentioned it's not always an easy read.
Right. The source material itself notes that the book can get quite dense. It dives deep into geopolitical complexities.
Like what, for example?
Well, things like the internal debates within the war cabinet, detailed analysis of complex early campaigns like the disastrous Norwegian campaign initially, or the logistics around defending Greece. These are historically critical details, absolutely, but they can slow things down if you're reading it purely for the leadership psychology lessons.
Okay, so it requires some work from the reader, which maybe fits the title, The Man Who Thought. You have to think along with it.
Exactly. It's not just a motivational summary. And the second critique often leveled is that, in celebrating Churchill's strategic genius, the book tends to focus heavily on the successes, the outcomes that ultimately validated his choices.
Right. Hindsight is 20/20.
Precisely. It doesn't always fully convey the sheer weight of the risk involved in those decisions at the time, or maybe some of the earlier failures he had before becoming prime minister. You sometimes miss the full terrifying difficulty of the struggle that came before those famous triumphant speeches.
Got it. Still, connecting the dots here, regardless of the historical density, the book's value seems immense. Because it's really showing us how to avoid passivity, right?
Absolutely. It's almost like a handbook for confronting problems head on, not just with, brute force, but with intelligence, with strategy, with strength.
It translates this extreme form of strategic thinking into something we can actually grapple with today.
That's the goal.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me and hopefully for you listening. How do we take these almost extreme wartime principles, refusing to surrender to an existential threat, and use the mechanism of that strategy, apply it in a high-stakes business context, or even a personal one? Let's start with application 1, crisis leadership beyond war. Maybe applying the mechanism of that steadfastness pillar 4.
Right. So the modern parallel to refusing to negotiate with Hitler, it might be refusing to compromise your core mission when you're facing really debilitating financial pressure or intense competitive threats. Imagine you're, say, a startup CEO. You're struggling to raise your next funding round.
Been there.
Right. And maybe your board or your major shareholders, they're pressuring you hard. Pivot radically towards some known, safe, but maybe mediocre market, something that compromises the vision of your breakthrough product.
That's the moment, the strategic moment of potential surrender.
Precisely. The Churchillian mechanism here says, instead of taking the easy way out, seeking a quick, maybe low-value exit, or compromising the very DNA of your product just to please investors, you have to articulate an uncompromising vision of success. You resist that internal pressure pushing you towards the path of least resistance.
Because compromising guarantees mediocrity.
Just as Churchill believed compromising with the Nazis guaranteed ultimate defeat, compromising your core market value, your unique selling proposition, often guarantees business mediocrity or failure.
That's a really powerful translation. It moves beyond just saying be courageous to something more specific. Identify the prevailing wisdom pushing for compromise and articulate why it's a false solution.
Exactly. Okay, moving to application 2, the power of rhetoric in business. Using pillar 2. And again, this is more than just, giving rah-rah motivational speeches. In business, rhetoric is often required to define reality, especially during periods of extreme uncertainty.
Right. Like if a whole global market is shifting under your feet, say a major inflection point with AI adoption or maybe a regulatory collapse, your team is facing massive uncertainty. It's maybe analogous to the start of the Blitz for Londoners. A weak leader tries to minimize the threat, pretend it's not happening.
Whereas the Churchillian response is to use strong, clear communication, to name the challenges directly, to define the new reality, however harsh, and then, crucially, articulate a unified mission that feels bigger than just the product or the quarterly numbers.
So a manager facing, say, mass layoffs because of market volatility.
Exactly. That manager needs to use their voice not to deny the pain, but to articulate the path forward. Rebuild team cohesion around the essential strategic goals that remain. Just as Churchill used his voice to unite people under literal fire.
Is using narrative strategically to maintain operational confidence, even when the balance sheets are maybe screaming something else.
Absolutely. Okay, third application. Strategic foresight for growth. Pillar 3. In business, this is about constantly scanning the horizon, looking at the global landscape to spot emerging threats or maybe potential alliances that you'll need before they become critical.
So planning your product roadmap not just based on your immediate competitor.
But for the paradigm shift, that might be 5 years out.
Right.
So maybe a technology company foresees a future increase in demand for highly regulated products, or perhaps highly personalized smart products. The foresight application means investing heavily in the necessary compliance or security or personalization infrastructure today, now, even though it costs a fortune now and the market demand isn't quite fully mature yet.
You're investing in the eventual allied victory, so to speak, securing the necessary resources long before the tide fully turns in the current market battle.
You got it. Like Churchill preparing for the U.S. entry into the war. You're fighting today's battle, yes, but you're simultaneously ensuring you've already secured the critical resources you'll need for the next one.
That requires a really broad view, assessing the global industry ecosystem, not just your little slice of market share.
It does. It requires dedicated strategic thinking time. And finally, application 4. Applying the unyielding spirit, pillar 1, specifically to entrepreneurship, founding a business.
Well, it's often a relentless process, isn't it? Setbacks, financial failures, market rejection. It's a constant battle against the temptation to just quit.
Absolutely. The ultimate takeaway here seems to be modeling Churchill's pure resilience. That every financial hit, every commercial failure, every logistical nightmare, it's just a setback. It's not surrender.
Right. You have to refuse to yield to the pressure of the difficulty itself. Understand that persistence, that sheer refusal to quit, is itself a strategic asset.
How so?
Because it depletes the resolve of your competitors. It wears down the naysayers. Your staying power becomes part of your strategic advantage. In essence, Churchill teaches us that maybe the most powerful strategic advantage you possess is your own will, and critically, your ability to articulate that will effectively to others. You're turning internal resolve into external executable strategy.
That's it, exactly.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've seen how Churchill's principles, this crisis leadership, deep foresight, the strategic power of speech, and that uncompromising resistance, they aren't just dusty historical footnotes.
No, they're really a kind of manual, a guide for anyone who has to lead during periods of high turbulence, high stress, high stakes.
So let's distill it down. What are 3 highly actionable steps someone can take away today to implement this kind of thinking?
Okay, 3 things. 1, cultivate uncompromising steadfastness. When you're faced with a really major challenge, take a moment. Identify the compromise position that maybe everyone else is pushing for. And if that compromise undermines your core mission, your core values, articulate a new, uncompromising vision of success. Just like Churchill did in 1940. Don't just accept the easy way out.
Okay, number 2.
2, practice future-centric planning. Seriously. Don't just analyze the current situation or drown in yesterday's data. Actively dedicate time, put it in your calendar to assess market inflection points, global shifts, technological changes. Ensure you're securing the strategic alliances, the talent, the resources you'll need for the battle 5 years from now, not just next quarter.
Proactive, not reactive. And number 3.
3, Weaponize your words. And I use that word deliberately. Use your communication skills not just to motivate people vaguely, but to actively define reality for your team or your stakeholders. Transform that passive fear or uncertainty into active, unified adherence to your core strategic mission. Make the narrative work for you.
Powerful stuff.
Churchill really reminds us, doesn't he, that true leadership isn't about somehow avoiding the storm. That's impossible. It's about having the courage, yes, but also the strategic will, the thinking, to navigate the toughest waters, and maybe even deliberately transform the crisis itself into a unique, defining advantage.
So the final question for you is, how will you apply that profound audacity, that strategic thinking, in the face of your next major challenge?
Think about it.
And we genuinely love to hear your experiences. Where have you had to refuse to surrender on a strategic goal, maybe against strong internal pressure? Share your insights with us. Thank you for diving deep with us today.